He called me from a paradise to tell me he had destroyed my world. His voice, crackling with poor reception and something else, triumph, informed me that our 22-year marriage was over. That he was in love with someone else. And that as a parting gift, he had stolen every single dime of the inheritance my beloved uncle left me. He was laughing. I could hear the ocean waves and a woman's laughter in the background. And my response? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply whispered, "You're right. You deserve it," and I hung up the phone. Hello everyone. If you're finding strength in a quiet place today, you are welcome here. This is a channel for those who have ever had their trust shattered and had to find the courage to piece themselves back together, stronger than before. Before we dive into the deepest betrayal of my life, I need to ask you something. Has there ever been a moment in your life where everything you believed to be true just vanished? Where the person you trusted most became a stranger? If you know that feeling, that cold, sinking realization, I want you to type "I see you" in the comments below. Let me know I'm not alone in telling this story. And while you're there, tell me where you are watching from. The city, the state, the country. I read every single comment, and it truly helps to see this incredible, global community of survivors. And if you're ready for a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate redemption, then you are in the right place. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because this is a story you will not want to miss. My name is Danielle Foster. I'm 45 years old, and for the last 15 years, I've been a senior accountant at Hollowgate Systems. My world is one of balance sheets, ledgers, and decimal points. I find comfort in order. In things adding up. For 22 years, I believed my marriage to Greg was one of those balanced equations. I was wrong. The truth was, I was running a massive deficit of love and respect, and I was the only one trying to balance the books. Greg was the dreamer. When we met in college, he was a whirlwind of charisma and big ideas. He talked about building an empire, a legacy. I, the sensible accounting major, was swept away by his vision. I thought we complemented each other. I would be the foundation, and he would be the architect. But over the years, the architect kept drawing up flawed plans. There was the construction company that collapsed under the weight of his unrealistic bids. The restaurant investment where his silent partner turned out to be anything but silent and loudly litigious. The cryptocurrency venture that he jumped into at the absolute peak, which evaporated our vacation fund and a sizable chunk of our savings. Each time, I was the one who quietly, methodically, plugged the holes in our financial lifeboat. I took on extra work, I reworked our budget, I sold things. I never threw his failures in his face. I thought I was being a supportive wife. He saw it as proof that I was a doormat. The turning point, though I didn't know it at the time, was the passing of my uncle Theodore. He wasn't just my uncle, he was my mentor, the father I never had. He was a self-made man, twice over. He'd built a fortune in his 30s, only to have it stolen by a business partner he considered a brother. He lost everything. The house, the cars, the security. He told me once, his voice graveled with age and regret, "Danielle, money doesn't change people. It just removes the mask they were already wearing." He rebuilt his wealth in his 50s, but this time, he built it with walls, moats, and a legion of legal guard dogs. When he left me his entire estate, $600,000, and the cherished family cabin at Blackberry Ridge, he didn't just leave me money. He left me a fortress and the blueprint to defend it. In his will was a separate, sealed letter addressed only to me. It read, "My dearest Danielle, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if history has taught me anything, it is that fortune attracts predators. Even those who smile at you across the dinner table. This money is not just a gift, it is your freedom. Protect it with the same ferocity you would protect your own life. Do not let anyone, and I mean anyone, convince you to lower your defenses. Not even a husband. At the time, sitting in the somber quiet of my own home, I felt a pang of guilt. Was he talking about Greg? It seemed unthinkable. But Uncle Theodore's paranoia was born of searing experience, so I listened. I sought out his financial advisor, Patricia Wells, at the exclusive Gravora Group Private Banking. Patricia was a woman in her 50s with the sharpest eyes I'd ever seen and a handshake that could crush bone. She didn't smile much, but she knew her business better than anyone. "Your uncle was very specific, Danielle," she'd said, her voice crisp and efficient. "We will place the assets in a discretionary trust. It's not just a matter of passwords. It's a legal structure. The funds are not technically yours to casually spend, they are managed by the trust for your benefit. Any significant withdrawal requires a multi-step verification process that includes voice recognition, one-time code sent to a secure device we will provide you, and in some cases, a direct confirmation from me." It felt excessive. It felt like we were preparing for a financial zombie apocalypse. But I agreed to everything. Greg, of course, was curious. "So, what's the plan with the money, Danny?" he'd asked one evening, trying to sound casual as he flipped through a car magazine. "We could finally get that beach house. Or I've been looking at this incredible franchise opportunity. I'm still working through the details with the estate lawyer," I deflected, my heart pounding a little. "It's complicated. A lot of tax implications." He'd nodded, but a shadow of something, annoyance, suspicion, flickered in his eyes. That was the first crack. The cracks became chasms over the next year. The golf weekends became more frequent. The networking dinners ran later. He became secretive with his phone, angling the screen away from me, taking calls in another room. The scent of a sweet, cloying perfume, something I would never wear, lingered on his jacket once. When I asked about it, he laughed it off. "Must be from the new air freshener at the club, babe. You're being paranoid." But I'm an accountant. Paranoia is a professional tool. I started checking our joint bank statements more closely. I noticed small, recurring withdrawals from ATMs in parts of town he never usually visited. $50 here, $100 there. Always on Fridays. I saw a credit card charge for a boutique hotel in Seattle for a night he was supposedly at a team-building retreat with his golf buddies. My blood ran cold, but I didn't confront him. Confrontation was his game. He was a master of turning arguments around, of making me feel crazy for doubting him. My game was evidence. My game was patience. So, I began my own audit. I started a secret log on an encrypted cloud drive he knew nothing about. I documented every suspicious charge, every late night, every flimsy excuse. I was building a case, though for what, I wasn't yet sure. And then, the final piece of the trap presented itself. About a month ago, Greg's interest in my banking habits became brazen. "Hey, Danny, you should really let me help you with the finances. 2 heads are better than 1. What's the name of that bank Uncle Ted used again? I'd love to look into their investment portfolios." It was a predator getting impatient. So, I gave him something to pounce on. I created a flawless, fake bank statement. It listed a fictional account at a well-known, but less secure, national bank. The balance was a respectable but not life-changing $150,000. I printed it out and left it sitting in plain sight on my home office desk one Saturday morning. Then I pretended to get a long, important work call, leaving him alone in the room. I didn't leave completely. I stood just around the corner, my back against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. I heard the soft rustle of paper. I heard the distinct, silent click-whir of his phone's camera. He was taking pictures. He was stealing the bait. I felt a physical pain then, a sharp, stabbing sensation in my chest. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to have it confirmed. The man I had shared a bed with for over 2 decades was meticulously plotting to rob me. A week later, he announced his golf trip to Arizona. Big tournament, babe. The cell service at the resort is spotty, so don't worry if you can't reach me. I simply nodded. Have fun, Greg. The day he left, the silence in the house was deafening. It was also peaceful. I knew what was coming. I was ready. Danielle, narrator, and then, the call came. The one that was supposed to be my execution. Greg, VO, phone filter, sounds relaxed and smug. Danielle. It's me. Danielle, narrator. I could hear it immediately. The wind, the distant cry of seagulls. And underneath it all, the light, airy laughter of a young woman. It wasn't a golf resort. It was a beach. Greg, VO, look, I'm not going to drag this out. I'm not coming back. I've moved on. Found someone who actually appreciates me for who I am, not just for what I can provide. Danielle, in the memory, closes her eyes for a brief second. When she opens them, they are clear and hard. Greg, VO, and since you were always so possessive with your money, I've taken the liberty of moving your inheritance into my name. All of it. The cash, the cabin. Everything. Consider it my severance package. A smug chuckle. Greg, VO, you really should have paid more attention to your accounts, sweetheart. You were always too trusting. Danielle, narrator. The words, sweetheart, felt like a slap. But the ice that flooded my veins wasn't fear. It was absolute, crystalline certainty. The trap had been sprung. And he was the one caught in it. Danielle, in flashback, her voice is a steady, low whisper, devoid of all emotion. You're right. You deserve it. He thought my calm was shock. He thought my acceptance was defeat. He had no idea he was listening to the sound of his own doom being sealed. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, listening to the rhythm of the rain, feeling the tectonic plates of my life shift irrevocably. The careful, methodical, trusting Danielle of yesterday was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone forged in the fire of betrayal. I poured myself a glass of rich, red wine, a bottle Greg had always said was too expensive to open, and opened my laptop. I navigated to the real Gravora Group banking portal. It required my secure key fob and a retinal scan. The screen glowed, displaying the real balance, $612,478.33. It had grown. Not a single penny was missing. A notification banner was flashing at the top of the screen. Security event logged, 2:14 p.m. Unauthorized access attempt on linked decoy account number 4892. Fraud prevention protocols engaged. Account frozen. Federal reporting threshold met. Legal counsel notified. He had taken the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. I began to type, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I was no longer just a victim. I was the architect of my own future, and I was drafting the plans. But this is where I need to pause our story for a moment. Can you imagine? The sheer audacity of that phone call? If you're feeling furious on my behalf, or maybe you're cheering for what's coming next, let me know in the comments. What would you have done in that moment? And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. The next morning, at 7:15 sharp, my phone rang again. It was Greg. The smugness was gone, replaced by a thin, reedy panic. Greg, VO, frantic. Danielle, what the hell is going on? I tried to transfer the money yesterday and now the bank is saying there's some kind of investigation. They froze everything. Danielle, calmly sipping her coffee. Good morning to you, too, Greg. How's your golf trip going? Get a lot of birdies? Greg, VO, cut the crap. What did you do? This is your fault. Danielle, I didn't do anything, sweetheart. But apparently, you tried to commit bank fraud. Accessing an account that isn't yours with stolen information? That tends to trigger automatic security protocols. It's a federal crime, from what I understand. Greg, VO, what are you talking about? I'm your husband. That's our money. I have rights. Danielle, actually, you don't. Not to my inheritance. It was never our money, Greg. It was in a discretionary trust, a fortress built by a man who knew a thing or two about thieves. And when you tried to storm the gates, you didn't just set off an alarm. You triggered a clause in the trust that legally forfeits your claim to all of our marital assets. The house, the cars, the shared savings, it's all mine now. You get nothing. The silence on the other end of the line was so profound I could hear the ocean in the background again. And the woman, Amber, I presumed, saying, Greg, baby, what's wrong? Greg, VO, his voice now a strained, desperate whisper, you're lying. You can't do that. Danielle, I didn't have to do anything. You did it to yourself. I'm filing for divorce today, Greg. My lawyer will be in touch. Enjoy the rest of your trip. She hangs up. This time, she doesn't just set the phone down. She holds down the power button and watches the screen go black. Danielle, narrator, the silence was golden. For the first time in years, my mind was quiet. The constant, low-grade anxiety of managing Greg, of smoothing things over, of pretending not to see what was right in front of me, it was gone. Replaced by a clear, focused purpose. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in the imposing, oak-paneled office of Jennifer Patterson, of Patterson and Associates. Jennifer was known as the Barracuda in Portland divorce circles, and one look at her told you why. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that missed nothing. Danielle, she said, after reviewing the folder I'd handed her. Her voice was calm, but I saw the glint of predatory glee in her eyes. This is not just a divorce case. This is a masterpiece. The premeditation, the forged documents, the federal fraud, it's all here. He's not just getting a divorce, he's walking into a legal woodchipper. I handed her another file. There's more. He's been systematically draining our joint account. Small amounts, under $500 at a time, so it wouldn't trigger alerts. It adds up to over $15,000 over the past 8 months. Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. Do you know where it was going? I do, I said, sliding the private investigator's report across her polished desk. He opened a separate account at a credit union across town. The money was for hotel rooms, fancy dinners, and a very expensive necklace from a boutique in Phoenix. His golf trip is at the La Paloma Resort with a 28-year-old bartender named Amber. Jennifer let out a low whistle. With this, we don't just file for divorce on grounds of adultery. We file for constructive fraud, dissipation of marital assets, and we use the attempted bank fraud as leverage to ensure he walks away with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal debt. I felt a surge of power. This was what Uncle Theodore had prepared me for. This was the defense he had armed me with. But just as I was leaving Jennifer's office, my secure, encrypted phone, the one linked to my trust, buzzed. It was Patricia Wells from Gravora. Patricia, VO, all business. Danielle, I need to inform you of a development. Our forensic review of the security logs shows this wasn't an isolated incident. Your husband has been attempting to socially engineer information from our staff for months. He called in February pretending to be your financial planner. He showed up in person in March with a fake business card. Danielle, narrator, my breath caught in my throat. It was even worse than I thought. Patricia, VO, we have it all on security camera footage and call recordings. This establishes a clear, protracted pattern of premeditation. The federal authorities will be very interested in this. It moves this from a simple attempted fraud to a potential conspiracy charge. Danielle, narrator, federal authorities. Conspiracy. The words hung in the air, heavy and real. This was spiraling into something far bigger than a messy divorce. This was about prison. As I sat in my car, the rain starting again, trying to process the fact that my husband was not just a cheat but a would-be criminal mastermind, my personal phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. On-screen text message appears. Unknown number, this is Amber. Greg told me what you did. You're a vindictive B**********. He's never been happier than he is with me. He says you were cold and boring. He's finally living his life. You should just let him go. I stared at the message, a fresh wave of anger washing over me. This girl, this child, was living in a fantasy that my husband and her lover had built on a foundation of lies and stolen dreams. She had no idea the ground was about to open up beneath her feet. And that's when I made my final decision. I would not be a passive victim. I would not simply defend myself. I would ensure that Greg faced the full, unmitigated consequences of his actions. He wanted a war. He was about to get one. And he had just declared it on a master strategist. Danielle looks directly into the camera, her gaze unwavering. The piano music returns, slow and determined. Danielle, narrator, but this was only the beginning. Greg's panic was about to turn into something far more dangerous, desperation. And a desperate man is an unpredictable one. He wasn't going to just accept his fate lying down. He was going to fight back with everything he had left. And his new partner, Amber, she was about to step out of the shadows and into the crossfire of a battle she didn't even know she was in. What do you think happens next? Do you think Greg tries to come home and explain? Do you think he runs? Or does he try to turn the tables on me? I want to hear your theories in the comments. The story is about to take twists and turns you will not believe. The next chapter involves a shocking revelation from the past, a dangerous confrontation, and a piece of evidence so damning it changes everything. If you are on the edge of your seat, if you need to know what happens to Greg and Amber, and how I reclaim my life. The silence after I powered off my phone was the most profound peace I had experienced in a decade. Greg's panicked call had been the starter's pistol, and I was already running. But the world, it seemed, wasn't quite done with its surprises. The first one arrived in my email inbox later that afternoon. It was from Patricia Wells at Gravora Group, with the subject line, Urgent Supplemental Documents for Counsel. Attached, alongside the security logs and fraud reports, was a single PDF. It was a scanned copy of a life insurance policy Greg had taken out on me just 6 months ago. My breath hitched. The policy was for $2 million. And the sole beneficiary was not our joint living trust, as we had always agreed. It was Gregory Foster, individually. I sat back, the room tilting slightly. This was more than betrayal, this was a cold, calculated assessment of my worth to him, dead versus alive. Had Uncle Theodore's inheritance not come through, would this have been his next plan? A sudden, tragic accident? The thought was so monstrous I had to physically shake my head to dispel it. But the seed was planted. The man I had loved was capable of anything. I forwarded the email immediately to Jennifer Patterson. Her response was swift and grim, "This changes the calculus. We're not just dealing with a cheat. We're dealing with a predator. I'm advising we involve the police on a potential threat assessment. And Danielle, be vigilant. Vigilant." The word echoed in my empty house. I walked to the front door, checking the deadbolt for the third time that day. The rain had stopped, but a new kind of storm was gathering. The next morning, I went into the office. Maintaining a facade of normalcy was my new armor. I buried myself in spreadsheets and quarterly reports, the familiar language of numbers a comforting constant in my crumbling world. It was there, amid the hum of servers and the click of keyboards, that my assistant poked her head in. "Danielle? Your sister-in-law is here to see you. She says it's urgent." Cynthia. Greg's sister. My heart sank. Cynthia was a kind woman, but fiercely loyal to her brother. I braced myself for a tearful plea, a lecture on the sanctity of marriage. But the woman who walked into my office was not the Cynthia I knew. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. "Danielle," she whispered, before the door was even fully closed. "I need to talk to you. It's about Greg." "I know about Amber, Cynthia," I said, my voice weary. "I know about the money." "It's worse than that," she said, her eyes darting around the room as if afraid of being overheard. "He came to see me last week. Before he left on his trip. He was different. Angry. He said you had become a liability. That you were hoarding his money and standing in the way of his happiness." The word liability hung in the air, echoing the life insurance policy. "What else did he say, Cynthia?" I prompted, my voice soft. She swallowed hard. "He asked about Dad's old service revolver. The one from his army days. He said he wanted it for protection at a new construction site he was looking at." It sounded so flimsy, Danielle. I told him it was lost years ago. But he kept pressing. He was desperate. She looked at me, her eyes full of a terrified apology. "I think I just lied to my brother to protect you from him. What is happening?" In that moment, any lingering doubt vanished. Greg wasn't just planning a new life, he was erasing the old one. And I was the primary obstacle. I thanked Cynthia, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name, gratitude mixed with a chilling fear. I walked her out, then immediately called Jennifer. "We need a restraining order. Now." The legal machinery grinded into a higher gear. The temporary restraining order was granted by a judge that same afternoon, based on the evidence of the insurance policy, Cynthia's testimony, and the ongoing federal fraud investigation. It felt like a flimsy piece of paper against the tide of Greg's desperation, but it was a start. 2 days later, the second shoe dropped. My phone lit up with a call from an Arizona area code. It wasn't Greg. It was Amber. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, and a need to understand the full depth of the fantasy she was living in, made me hit accept. "Danielle?" Her voice was younger than I'd imagined, but it was stripped of the texting bravado. It was shaky, scared. "This is Danielle. It's Amber. Listen, I don't know what's going on. Greg is losing it. The bank won't give him any money. He's maxed out his credit cards. He got served with some legal papers this morning and he threw his phone against the wall. He's talking crazy." "What kind of crazy, Amber?" I asked, my voice calm, a stark contrast to her panic. "He's saying you set him up. That you're trying to destroy him. He said if he can't have the money, then no one can." "What does that mean? Is he talking about hurting you?" A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "Where is he now?" "He went out. He said he had to go handle something. He took a bag with him." "I'm scared, Danielle. I think I made a huge mistake." The line went dead. "Handle something. A bag." My mind raced, connecting the dots from the life insurance policy to Cynthia's warning about the gun to Amber's terrified call. The trajectory was horrifyingly clear. He wasn't just coming for the money anymore. He was coming for me. I called Agent Martinez. I called Jennifer Patterson. I called building security at my office and gave them Greg's photo, instructing them he was not to be allowed in under any circumstances. I was building a fortress, just like Uncle Theodore taught me. That night, alone in the house, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind in the trees outside, was a potential threat. I slept with my phone in my hand and a baseball bat next to my bed, a pathetic defense against a man who might be armed and unhinged, but it was all I had. The call came at 3:17 a.m. It was the security desk in my building's lobby. "Miss Foster? Sorry to disturb you. There's a gentleman here, a Greg Foster, demanding to be let up. He's not in a good state. We've informed him of the restraining order and refused him entry. He became agitated and left, but we wanted to make you aware. He was here. In Portland." The fantasy golf trip was over. Reality had crashed down on him, and he had come home to confront the source of his ruin. Me. The next 48 hours were a blur of heightened alert. I stayed with a colleague, my movements cautious and unpredictable. Jennifer expedited the divorce filings, using the attempted breach of my workplace and Amber's statement as further evidence of his dangerous instability. And then, the break we needed. Agent Martinez called. "Mrs. Foster, we've been monitoring his financial activity. He attempted to withdraw a large sum of cash from an ATM using a credit card. We have his location. He's still in the city. We're moving to apprehend him on the federal fraud charges. I need you to stay somewhere safe and confirm your location." I gave her the address, my hands trembling not with fear, but with a long-awaited sense of justice. The net was closing. The arrest was anticlimactic in its efficiency. They found him in a budget motel on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by empty mini bottles and the shattered remains of his ego. There was no dramatic shootout, no final confrontation. Just the quiet, bureaucratic click of handcuffs and the reading of his rights. He was charged with attempted bank fraud, identity theft, and violation of federal banking regulations. The state would later add charges related to the violation of the restraining order. The life insurance policy was handed over to the DA's office for review. I didn't feel triumph when I got the news. I felt a deep, weary relief. It was over. The immediate threat was neutralized. A week after his arrest, I received a letter. It was from Greg, forwarded by his court-appointed attorney. Jennifer advised me not to read it, but I had to. I needed to see the final act of this tragedy. The handwriting was a chaotic scrawl, a mirror of his mind. "Danielle, you win. You destroyed me. I hope you're happy with your money. It was always more important to you than I was. She left me, you know. Amber." As soon as the cuffs went on. "You were right about everything. But you didn't have to do this. You didn't have to send me to prison. We could have worked it out. I still love you. Remember our song? Remember the lake house? That was real. This is all a bad dream. Please, Danny. Don't do this. I'm begging you. Drop the charges. I'll come home. We can fix this. Your husband, Greg." I read it once. Then I carefully folded it back into the envelope, walked to the kitchen, and held it over the sink as I lit a match. I watched the paper curl and blacken, the embers dissolving into ash. There was no anger left. No hatred. Just a vast, empty pity for the man who could, even now, only see himself as the victim. He was right about one thing. It was all a bad dream. But I was finally, blessedly, waking up. The divorce proceedings, as Jennifer predicted, were a formality. With Greg in federal custody, facing years in prison, his bargaining power was zero. The judge granted the divorce with prejudice, awarding me everything. The house, the remaining savings, my retirement, and of course, the fully intact inheritance. Greg was ordered to pay my legal fees, a debt he would likely never be able to satisfy. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun was breaking through the Portland clouds. The air smelled clean, washed by the recent rains. I was free. But a new question began to form in my mind, one I hadn't had the space to consider until now. What was I going to do with this freedom? What was I going to build with the pieces of my life that were entirely, unquestionably, my own? Freedom, I quickly learned, was a strange and spacious room after 22 years in a cramped closet. The silence in my house was no longer threatening, it was luxurious. I could eat what I wanted, watch what I wanted, and leave a cup in the sink without a passive-aggressive comment. For the first few weeks, I simply existed in this new, quiet reality, allowing myself to heal. The financial battle was over. The divorce was final. Greg was sentenced to 28 months in federal prison, a term that felt both satisfying and tragically small for the seismic shift he had caused in my life. I didn't attend the sentencing. Jennifer went on my behalf and reported that he showed no remorse, only a simmering resentment. He was, to the very end, the victim of his own story. With the legal dust settling, I finally met with Patricia Wells to discuss the future. The inheritance, with interest and shrewd management, had grown. I was, by any definition, a wealthy woman. Patricia laid out options: conservative bonds, aggressive stocks, real estate investments. But as she spoke, none of it resonated. The money felt inert, a monument to a battle fought, not a foundation for a new life. It was during this period of limbo that I decided to finally visit the one part of my inheritance I had been avoiding, the cabin at Blackberry Ridge. I needed to see the place Uncle Theodore had loved so much, the place Greg had so casually tried to steal. The drive into the Cascade Mountains was a balm for my soul. The air grew cooler, scented with pine and damp earth. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it from childhood summers, a sturdy A-frame of weathered cedar, nestled in a grove of towering fir trees, with a creek babbling behind it. It was smaller, humbler than the grand image the word cabin might conjure, but it was perfect. The key was under the familiar, moss-covered rock. The door swung open with a creak of protest. The inside was frozen in time, smelling of wood smoke and old books. I walked through the main room, my fingers trailing over the rough-hewn log walls, the massive stone fireplace. On the mantelpiece was a photograph of a young Uncle Theodore, his arm around a woman with a brilliant, kind smile. My Aunt Clara, who had passed away long before I was born. I felt a pang of grief, not just for him, but for the love they had shared. It was a stark contrast to the transactional ruin of my own marriage. It was in the small, pine-paneled study that I found it. Tucked inside a volume of Robert Frost's poetry, Theodore's favorite, was a sealed, yellowed envelope with my name on it, written in his familiar, looping script. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was dated just a month before he died. My dearest Danielle. If you are reading this, you are at the cabin, and you are likely here because you needed a refuge. I always found this to be the best place to think, to heal, to remember what truly matters. The money is your shield. It will protect you from the storms of life. But a shield is a defensive tool. It is not a purpose. I fear I may have focused too much on teaching you to defend yourself, and not enough on encouraging you to build a life worth defending. You have a good heart, Danielle, and a brilliant, meticulous mind. But for years, I have watched you pour your energy into shoring up Greg's fragile ego and fleeting schemes. You have been the architect of someone else's dream, and a poorly conceived one at that. So, I am leaving you one final instruction, not as your financial advisor, but as your uncle who loves you. Use the shield to protect yourself, yes. But then, use the resources behind it to build something that is entirely, joyfully, and unapologetically yours. What that is, only you can decide. But do not be afraid. You are far more capable than you know. All my love, always. Theodore. I sat down heavily in his old leather armchair, the letter crinkling in my hand. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition. He had seen me, truly seen the quiet desperation of my life, even when I hadn't seen it myself. He wasn't just giving me money, he was giving me permission. I stayed at the cabin for a week. I walked in the woods, I read by the fire, and I thought. I thought about what I was good at, what I enjoyed, what made me feel alive. The answer, when it came, was so simple it was almost laughable. Numbers. Order. Creating systems that worked. But not for a mid-size logistics company. Not for someone else's bottom line. An idea began to form, fragile at first, then with increasing clarity and excitement. I thought of all the women I knew, through friends and colleagues, who were like I had been, smart, capable, but financially in the dark or financially trapped in their relationships. The ones who handled the household budget but had no real financial literacy or power. The ones who stayed in bad situations because they couldn't see a way out. I could teach them. I could build a financial literacy and empowerment center specifically for women. A place where they could learn about budgeting, investing, understanding credit, and protecting their assets in a safe, supportive environment. I could offer scholarships, one-on-one coaching, and workshops. I could be the Patricia Wells for women who would never step foot in a Gravora Group office. The idea felt like a spark catching flame. It was mine. It was joyful. It was unapologetic. I drove back to Portland a different woman. I had a purpose. I immediately set up a meeting with Jennifer Patterson, not for divorce proceedings, but to discuss setting up a nonprofit foundation. I reached out to a few trusted, savvy women in my network. The response was overwhelmingly positive. They saw the need, they believed in the mission, and they believed in me. I named it the Clara and Theodore Foundation, in honor of the love that had built the cabin and the wisdom that had saved me. As the foundation took its first steps, another piece of my past resurfaced, but this time, it was a gentle echo. Sorting through a box of old files, I found a forgotten photo album from college. There were pictures of me, my hair long and wild, standing next to a pottery wheel in an art studio. I had minored in ceramics, a passion I had completely abandoned after graduation when Greg had convinced me that there was no money in art. On a whim, I looked up my old ceramics professor. He was retired but still taught a weekly community class. I signed up. The first time I sunk my hands into a lump of cool, wet clay, feeling it yield and shape under my fingers, I felt a piece of my soul click back into place. It was messy, unpredictable, and utterly absorbing. It was the antithesis of accounting, and it was exactly what I needed. In that studio, surrounded by the earthy smell of clay and the quiet hum of concentration, I wasn't a victim, a divorcee, or a senior accountant. I was just Danielle, a woman making something from nothing. 6 months after the divorce was final, my life was unrecognizable in the best way possible. My days were a fulfilling blend of building the foundation, my work at Hollowgate, and my evenings at the pottery studio. I had reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I had even gone on a few casual, nerve-wracking but ultimately pleasant dates, relearning the simple pleasure of conversation without an agenda. One rainy afternoon, I was at the cabin, reviewing architectural plans for the foundation's future headquarters, a beautiful old building we were renovating downtown. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Federal Inmate Communication System. Greg had sent me an email. I felt a familiar knot in my stomach, but it was smaller now, looser. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. It was short. Danielle, I heard through Cynthia about the foundation you're starting. She showed me an article in the paper. It looks impressive. I guess you finally found a use for that money. I hope it makes you happy. Greg. There was no love, no apology. But there was no venom either. It was just a statement of fact, an acknowledgement from a distant shore. It was the final, quiet closing of a door I had already walked through. I didn't reply. I simply closed the app, picked up my pencil, and went back to the blueprints. I was building something beautiful with what remained, just as Uncle Theodore had asked. And for the first time, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had earned my peace. They say time heals all wounds. I don't think that's entirely true. Time doesn't heal, it simply gives you the space to build a new life around the scar tissue, until the old injury is no longer the most interesting thing about you. A year after Greg's sentencing, the scar was still there, a dull ache on rainy days, but it no longer defined my every waking moment. The Clara and Theodore Foundation became my sanctuary and my proving ground. We found our home in a beautifully restored brick building in the Pearl District. The space was airy and bright, with warm wood floors and walls painted in calming, confident colors. It was designed to feel the opposite of a sterile bank or an intimidating boardroom. This was a place for women to breathe, to learn, to empower themselves without judgment. Our first workshop, Financial First Steps, Budgeting for Your Freedom, filled up in 48 hours. Standing at the front of that room, looking out at the faces of women of all ages, some nervous, some determined, all hopeful, I felt a sense of purpose so profound it brought tears to my eyes. This was my unclaimed inheritance. Not the money, but the mission. I shared my story, not with bitterness, but as a cautionary tale about the cost of financial silence. I saw heads nod in recognition. I saw the flicker of understanding in their eyes. I was no longer just Danielle Foster, senior accountant. I was Danielle Foster, a woman who had been to the brink and had returned with a map for others. One of our most popular programs was the Fresh Start Scholarship, funded entirely from the Foundation's endowment. We helped women leaving abusive situations secure first and last month's rent, provided them with financial coaching, and helped them navigate the complex paperwork of claiming their independence. Every success story felt like a personal victory, a stone laid in the foundation of my new life. It was through this work that I met Sarah. She was a young mother of two, her eyes shadowed with a fear I knew all too well. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and her husband had controlled every penny, leaving her with no credit, no savings, and no confidence. She came to us clutching a notebook filled with questions, her voice barely a whisper. Watching Sarah slowly find her footing, land a job, and open her own bank account was like watching a flower bloom in time-lapse. The day she came into the foundation, beaming, to show me the lease for her own small apartment, she didn't thank me. She hugged me and said, "You made me believe I could do it." In that moment, I understood Uncle Theodore's final gift completely. He hadn't just given me security, he had given me the means to become this version of myself, a beacon for others. My personal life was blossoming in quiet, unexpected ways. My pottery had progressed from lopsided bowls to pieces I was genuinely proud of. My instructor encouraged me to sell a few at a local artisan market. To my astonishment, they sold out. The feeling of someone valuing something I had created with my own hands, for no other reason than it brought them joy, was a new and intoxicating form of wealth. I even started dating again, tentatively. His name was David, and he was a history professor at Portland State. He was quiet, kind, and had a calming presence. He was fascinated by my work at the foundation and my pottery, and he never once asked about my past or my finances. With him, I learned the simple pleasure of a conversation that didn't have a hidden agenda, of a relationship that felt like a partnership, not a power struggle. One evening, as we were washing dishes after a simple dinner at my house, he looked at the row of my ceramic vases on the windowsill, catching the last of the sunset. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "you have a real talent for taking raw, shapeless things and turning them into something strong and beautiful." He was talking about the clay. But I felt the truth of his words resonate through my entire life. The past, however, has a way of sending out the occasional echo. I received a formal letter from the federal prison. Greg was coming up for parole. The board was requesting a victim impact statement. I sat with the letter for a long time. Jennifer offered to write a blistering legal statement on my behalf. But that didn't feel right. I didn't want to speak from a place of anger or fear anymore. I had transcended that. I decided to write it myself. I wrote about the betrayal, yes. I wrote about the fear, the violation, the financial sabotage. But I also wrote about what came after. I told them about the Clara and Theodore Foundation. I told them about Sarah and the dozens of other women we were helping. I explained that the man who had tried to destroy me had, in his failure, inadvertently helped create something good. I concluded by saying that while I believed Greg needed to serve his full sentence to truly understand the consequences of his actions, I held no hatred for him. My life was full, and my focus was on the future, not the past. I sent the letter. I had done my part. The outcome was out of my hands, and for the first time, I was truly at peace with that. The day of the parole hearing came and went. I didn't attend. Jennifer called me with the result. They denied it, she said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. The board cited the premeditated nature of his crimes and the impact statement, which they found remarkably powerful in its lack of malice. He'll serve his full term. I thanked her and hung up. I felt a quiet sense of justice, but no glee. It was just a fact. A chapter was definitively closed. That weekend, David and I drove up to the cabin. It had become our retreat. As we sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars pierce the clear mountain sky, I felt a profound gratitude wash over me. The journey had been brutal. The betrayal had been absolute. But in losing the life I thought I had found the life I was always meant to live. I had built a fortress, not just of money, but of purpose. I had taken the shattered pieces of my trust and, with patience and fire, molded them into something new, something stronger and more beautiful than before. The quiet, methodical accountant was gone. In her place was a woman who had faced the storm, who had protected her kingdom, and who was now using her hard-won wisdom to help other women build their own. The inheritance was safe. The cabin was a sanctuary. But the greatest wealth, as Uncle Theodore promised, was the unshakable peace of mind that came from knowing, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I was enough. I was resilient. I was free. 5 years. It's a significant measure of time. Long enough for a sapling to become a young tree, for a child to start school, for a city to change its skyline. And for a woman to rebuild her life from the foundation up, layer by patient layer, until the blueprint of the past is completely overwritten by the architecture of the present. The Clara and Theodore Foundation was no longer a hopeful startup, it was a Portland institution, a beacon recognized in city council meetings and featured in local business journals. We had helped over 1,000 women achieve financial independence. We'd expanded beyond our initial workshops to offer microloans for female entrepreneurs, a program that had already spawned 3 successful local businesses, a bakery, a graphic design firm, and a sustainable landscaping company. We'd even partnered with Portland Community College to provide accredited financial literacy courses, turning survival skills into a credentialed advantage. Sarah, that first trembling woman who had clung to her notebook as if it were a life raft, was now our full-time program coordinator. Seeing her lead a workshop, her voice strong and clear, patiently explaining compound interest to a room of attentive women, was one of my greatest joys. She was living proof of the foundation's purpose. Uncle Theodore's legacy was no longer just a protected trust, it was a living, breathing force for good, its roots running deep in my community. My personal life had found its own gentle, steady rhythm, a melody so different from the jarring, dissonant chords of my marriage. David and I had created a life together built not on fiery, unpredictable passion, but on the bedrock of mutual respect, intellectual curiosity, and quiet companionship. We'd married 2 years prior in a small, simple ceremony at the Blackberry Ridge cabin, our vows whispered under a canopy of ancient fir trees, witnessed only by our closest friends and the chattering creek. There were no grandiose promises of forever, only quiet vows to be each other's sanctuary, to always choose kindness, and to keep building a shared world that felt safe for both of our souls. Our life was a tapestry woven from shared silences in the morning over coffee, from lively debates about history and art, from his well-thumbed history books stacked comfortably next to my glossy pottery magazines on the bedside table. It was the deep, abiding peace of being fully known and fully accepted, without having to perform or pretend. We had turned my old house, once a cage of anxiety, into a true home, its walls now adorned with my ceramic creations and vintage maps he collected. The ghost of Greg Foster had long since faded to a faint, impersonal footnote in my history. He had served his full 28-month sentence and, according to a brief, routine update from Jennifer a few years back, had moved to Nevada. There was no further contact. The chapter was not just closed, the book itself felt like it had been written by and about a different person altogether. One crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the Portland air is sharp with the scent of decaying leaves and wood smoke, I was in my sun-drenched office at the foundation, reviewing the draft of our annual report. The numbers were deeply satisfying, lives changed, futures secured, a positive balance sheet of human potential. My intercom buzzed, its tone pulling me from my thoughts. "Danielle? There's a delivery for you. A personal one. It looks important." A moment later, a uniformed courier handed me a thick, cream-colored, legal-sized envelope. It felt weighty, substantive. The return address was from a law firm I didn't recognize, Gable & Sons, based in Reno, Nevada. A flicker of the old, instinctual anxiety sparked in my chest, a phantom pain from a healed wound, but it died just as quickly. I was no longer the woman who flinched at unexpected mail. I was a woman who ran a foundation, who faced federal agents, who built things. A letter, no matter its origin, held no power over me anymore. I thanked the courier, closed my office door, and sat back down at my desk. Using a polished steel letter opener, a gift from David, I slit the envelope open. Inside was a covering letter from an attorney named Robert Gable, written in precise, formal language. And attached to it was a copy of a life insurance policy. It took me a moment, my eyes scanning the details, to understand what I was holding. It was the policy. The $2 million policy Greg had taken out on my life all those years ago, the one that had chilled me to my core, the discovery that had propelled me to get a restraining order. But Robert Gable's letter explained everything. He was representing the estate of Gregory Foster. Greg was dead. He had been killed a month prior in a single-car accident on a rain-slicked highway outside of Reno. The report stated he had been working as a site manager for a small, struggling construction company. He was alone. There had been no alcohol in his system, just speed and, the report suggested, probable fatigue. The letter was dry and legalistic, but it contained a stunning revelation. About a year before his death, Greg had contacted attorney Gable. He had restructured his meager affairs. He had no significant assets, no property, no savings to speak of. But he had left a set of specific, notarized instructions. The letter included a short, separate note, written on a plain piece of paper in Greg's familiar, now slightly shakier, handwriting, addressed directly to me. With a calm I would not have thought possible 5 years ago, I set the attorney's letter aside and picked up the personal note. "Danielle. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I won't insult you with a full apology. It would be too little, too late, and we both know it wouldn't scratch the surface of what I did. I've had a lot of time to think in a series of small, lonely rooms, both behind bars and out here in the desert. I thought about the lake house, our song, all the things I mentioned in that pathetic, manipulative letter I sent you from prison. I was still trying to play a game then, to find a lever to pull. I see that clearly now. The truth is, the man who loved those things died long before I did. I destroyed him. I became someone consumed by envy and resentment, a man who saw your strength as a threat and your kindness as a weakness to be exploited. I tried to dim your light because my own had gone out. My only real regret, the one that truly haunts me, is that I broke something beautiful between us out of sheer spite. I found an article about the foundation in an old newspaper at a bus station. Clara and Theodore. It's a good name. A strong name. You didn't just survive, Danielle. You took the wreckage I caused and you built a cathedral. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back those years. But I can, in this one small, final way, stop being a liability in your story. The life insurance policy I once took out with the darkest of intentions, I have now reassigned. I paid the premiums myself, every month. It was the only bill I never missed. The sole beneficiary is the Clara and Theodore Foundation. Consider it my first, and only, honest contribution to something good in this world. Maybe the only truly honest thing I've done since I was that young man you fell in love with. I hope you have a long, happy, and peaceful life. You deserve all of it, and so much more. Greg. I set the letter down on the polished surface of my desk. The room was silent, the only sound the distant hum of city traffic. I felt nothing at first. A blank slate. Then, it wasn't grief that washed over me, but a profound, overwhelming sadness, not for the bitter, dangerous man he became, but for the ghost of the man he could have been, for the shared dream we had once clutched with youthful hope that he had so thoroughly corrupted and abandoned. There was no anger left. No hatred. Just a vast, oceanic pity for a life so wasted. And then, following that, a sense of closure so absolute it felt like a physical weight, one I hadn't even realized I was still carrying, lifting from my shoulders. This was the final balance. The last ledger entry, closing an account that had been dormant for years. The man who had tried to steal my future, to potentially end my life, had, in his final, lucid act, chosen to fund it. The ultimate poison had become an unexpected, and strangely fitting, antidote. It was the redemption arc he never earned in life, but had meticulously arranged in death. I picked up the phone and called David. I read him the letter, my voice steady, almost clinical. He was silent for a long moment on the other end, absorbing the sheer magnitude of it. Then, his voice, warm and solid as always, simply said, "I'll leave campus now. I'll pick up some food. We'll open that bottle of Burgundy we've been saving tonight. Just, be with your thoughts. I love you." After I hung up, I just sat for a while, watching the afternoon light lengthen across my office floor. Then, I called Patricia Wells. I explained the situation, my voice firm and professional. The $2 million infusion, she calculated instantly, would not just sustain the foundation, it would catapult it into a new era. We could purchase a permanent headquarters, create a substantial endowment that would ensure its survival for generations, fund an entire new wing of programs for women transitioning out of the justice system. Uncle Theodore's legacy, and now, in the most bizarre and poignant twist of fate, Greg's, would be set in stone, a permanent force for good. That evening, David and I sat on the porch of our home, the home we had made together. We didn't speak much. We sipped the rich, complex wine and watched the sunset paint the Portland skyline in breathtaking hues of fiery orange and deep violet. The city lights began to twinkle on, one by one, like stars grounding themselves on earth. I thought about the long, winding, often painful road that had led me to this porch, to this peace. The betrayal that felt like an ending, but was really a brutal, necessary beginning. The inheritance that was both a shield and a key. The love I had lost and the profound, steady love I had found. My story wasn't a fairy tale. There was no prince on a white horse. There was a woman who had to save herself. A woman who had to learn, through fire and ice, to trust her own mind, value her own strength, and build her own kingdom, brick by brick. The villains and the allies, the tragedies and the triumphs, they were all just part of the journey that shaped her, that polished her rough edges into a smooth, unbreakable finish. I reached over and took David's hand. It was warm and solid, an anchor in the gentle tide of the evening. The past was finally, completely, at peace. It had been paid, in full, in the strangest of currencies. And the future, bright, expansive, and full of quiet promise, was entirely, wonderfully, my own. Please subscribe to my channel and share your country name in the comment below.